My name is Damon Brown. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a columnist for Inc. magazine, and I am also a best-selling author of the book, The Bite-Sized Entrepreneur. And my main thing is helping non-traditional entrepreneurs bloom. That's my purpose. And I'm with Dr. Tiffany Gray, and I'll let her introduce herself. She has an amazing bio. I didn't even try to compress it, because I was going to say she's a leader at Access and Eggs, which is a major crypto platform, but then that wasn't enough because she's a fellow elsewhere, so I'm going to let her explain her thing. But what we're going to focus on is, officially the title is The Crypto World, and how it's about Bitcoin, blockchain, and tomorrow's future, particularly in regards to money. We talked about it, and it's a little bit broader than that. We really want to talk about how specifically blockchain is going to change our day-to-day. And one of the things that we found with the conference, and when I had spoke a little bit at length earlier this afternoon, is that when we talk about blockchain, we're really talking about crowdsourcing in a sense. When we talk about crowdsourcing, we're talking about democratization, we're talking about representation, we're talking about an impact on everyone's lives. If it's going to impact everyone's life, then we have kind of a reset button to actually do things better this time, particularly here in America. So we have this wonderful opportunity to do so. So I'm going to go ahead and sit down because we have we're going to have our conversation sitting. And then Dr. Gray, if you can break down who you are and what your background is, and then we can get into the conversation.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Tiffany Gray. I have a doctorate in public health from George Washington University School of Public Health, not too far away from here. And so I have over 8 years of experience in public health research, doing health disparities, maternal child health, and health behaviors. And so I am a recent, wear many hats. So I'm recently a fellow with Blockchain in Healthcare Global, which is a newly formed trade organization that started about, I believe it was launched in June or July. I am also co-chair of the Global Health and Disaster Relief Subcommittee for the UN's Blockchain for Impact, part of their Blockchain for Impact initiative, and so that was launched in June as well, and so we're still in the developing things out there, and so we're looking to hopefully, in the future start identifying some blockchain-based projects, bringing and bridging together different organizations and partnerships there as well. Let's see, and I'm also an advisor partner with Access and Eggs. We are a small team. We are a blockchain-based think tank. We like to call ourselves, and we have partners in DC, Dubai, and New York as well.
I wasn't kidding.
I'm a marathon runner, so I'm actually running a marathon on Sunday. So I'm enjoying doing all the carbo running.
Thank you for it. You have cookies up there.
Yeah.
Lots of carbs there. I have family members that run marathons, so yeah. Good, best of luck.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
So we want to make it a little bit more interactive and ask all of you what your thoughts were. So who feels comfortable explaining what blockchain is? You can raise your hand. You don't have to explain it, but just. Do you want to?
I think you can do it.
No, you don't have to. You don't have to explain it. Just if you, just like a.
No, he does. He does have to do it.
Okay. Okay. I
He's
see.
so good. He's got it.
After you, sir, please.
Yeah. Well, to me, I actually go after you guys. So I talk about monetizing.
Exactly. Monetization. Nice to meet you.
To me, it's about moving data peer-to-peer without any middle players, and that transaction that's happening isn't going to a company's big server where it's a centralized information that they use. Instead, it's gone by multiple servers through people's computers, individuals around the community. So this is actually the money, that charge of 1 cent actually goes back to the public that's actually running it. That's why it's decentralized.
There you go. Does everyone agree with that?
I told you he had to do it.
I want to hear like a rebuttal. That's not okay. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to your talk right after this. Now, who here, I know you do, but who here actually owns cryptocurrency?
I sold it before it went down.
I bought it when it went up.
Everyone figures, it's like a stock market. Right?
Yeah.
Everybody figures out there.
It's like you're trying to buy it.
I would imagine. I know stocks a little bit,
I
or at least I know
love
stock history. That would make sense. And lastly, how many of you, if any of you, have a business that's actually based on blockchain? I need to start excluding you.
Yeah.
Awesome, because when Dr. Gray and I were talking, that was the thing we didn't quite know, because we have amazing folks like Warren and folks like Jeffrey Hazlitt, who was here yesterday. He's an amazing speaker. They're like knee deep in it. They're like, oh, I have millions in this and that and the third, but we didn't know how many people actually, fit into that mold. So we're trying to tailor that conversation. So I think we'll go ahead and work from there. One of your specialties is with healthcare and how blockchain, perhaps currency specifically, will affect our day-to-day care. Can you kind of step through, number one, how you got involved in that particular aspect of it? Because my wife's a pediatrician and all that. I know a lot of doctors. A lot of them aren't trying to talk about blockchain. So what avenue brought you there? And secondly, as a consumer, how is the blockchain experience going to change my everyday?
So in terms of me coming into, even hearing about blockchain, I still have colleagues and, people that I know within public health or family, friends, and I'm sure many of us in here have that same kind of experience where people are like, I keep hearing all this thing about blockchain and it's going to be the future and it's going to change everything and how we do everything. So I kind of came into, at least my experience, and I think that's also been the experience of many, I first heard about blockchain through cryptocurrency. So I think that's still the challenge in many cases is we're trying to educate others about blockchain and cryptocurrency and emerging technology is, everyone still thinks of it as we're tied to Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies and other tokens. So I got introduced through it to like Samson Williams, who was working on some crowdfunding projects, and then also got engaged in cryptocurrency and blockchain. And he had known about it for a long time from his own work and his experience. And so just attending different events and kind of tagging along and reading his information and posts that he was sharing.
And he's the founder.
He's the founder, yes, of Access and Eggs. And so that's how I started to hear more about blockchain. And even then, I still was, for me, again, being a person in public health and public health research, for me, talking about it, how will this impact your day-to-day? For me, it was, well, how does this fit into what I do? How does this fit into my work? How does this fit into how I'm going to help better improve population health, and the work that I do, or even grants funding and, grants management and things of that nature. So again, I started meeting others who were doing, or in blockchain specifically in healthcare, and that's where I was able to start kind of putting the pieces together and saying, okay, so I can see how this may impact things like medical records and how you can access your information and, learning about companies that are like Patientory based out of Atlanta, Chris McFarland, being able to have your information on your mobile device. So when you go, you can, as I go, say if I go to one practitioner, that person has my information, but if I go to another provider, they have no clue about my medical history unless someone sends that over. And then there's a lot of different policies and regulations and different systems that kind of impact the way that those types of transactions occur. And so I started learning more about that, and then for me, it became, okay, I'm thinking about, well, if everyone's saying that this is going to change the way in which people engage with healthcare or change the way our just kind of our daily lives or impact our future, what about the people that it's really going to truly affect, So talking about things like addressing, like, how is that, will that widen the disparities that we already have? Is that going to make it harder we already have issues with people being able to access basic care. So sure, it's great that I can have this information on my mobile device, but if they don't even know anything about just kind of interacting, with their provider on a day-to-day basis, or who to go to or who to turn to, is it, how do we begin to educate others that this is something that is going to potentially change your, how you interact with just how you shop groceries, or, talking about cryptocurrency, right? Or how is that going to change how I access care, or how is that just, how is this going to just change other aspects of life, essentially. So I think for me, the biggest thing was, I would hear a lot in discussions or different panels, talking about blockchain and cryptocurrency, this idea of like, well, people don't know about it, then that's on them, right? Like, but that leaves behind people that need to really know about blockchain, and that leaves behind people that really need to know about this thing that is going to ultimately change future transactions or future interactions with others and different entities and different organizations and payment systems and things like that. Or we have people who don't even have bank accounts, so, it's talking, it's fine to talk about it amongst ourselves all the time, and that's great to have these conversations, but it's like, how do we start being people like myself in my field to the table to start saying, well, this is how this, that don't have a clue of what blockchain is and have no clue beyond Bitcoin. Okay, let's start at, build a base for them, and then, talk about, well, what are the other ways in which we can utilize this emerging technology to improve the way in which we, like the gentleman before us talked about, just increasing access to kids about STEM and different, working together, working as a community instead of just being like, well, if you don't know about it, you don't know about it, and that's on you to learn and for you to figure out, essentially.
Right, no, that makes sense. Think about a really basic example where I think New York was significantly talking about getting rid of their Metro cards and just having an app. And it's like, well, to put money on the app, you need a bank account. And then there's a significant amount of New Yorkers, particularly in the Bronx, that don't have a bank account. Like, they don't have a checking account. They go in, they don't get direct deposit, they get a check, and they take it over to, mixed check cashing or whatever. And then they take their piece of it. I won't even get into that. But the issues that come with that. And so I guess the question, or one of the questions is, how do you suggest navigating that gap? Because there is definitely a gap there. So is it a matter of slowing down? Because one of two things, in my guess, one of two things has to happen. Either we need to slow down that blockchain revolution so that other people can catch up and the systems can catch up, or we find some way to bridge that gap quicker. Does that make sense?
Right. I think it would be more so, I think it's on a train and it's going and it's not going to slow down.
Okay.
So I think that the key is, again, learning how to bridge that gap for different, whether it be in, financial industry, whether it be in healthcare, whether it be, where social impact, whatever that may be. It's about identifying how we can start bridging that gap. And again, it's working with or going into or reaching out to those, in those communities, in those populations, or in those different groups, and start kind of spreading the message, and maybe even tailoring and changing the way in which we talk about it, taking it down from talking at the high technical level and breaking it down for people so that they can understand what this is. Not hype it up and just, stick with the hype of, oh, this is revolutionary, this is what this is, but really kind of getting down to, like we started off asking, what is blockchain? And then simplifying it there. And that's like, it can be difficult because, again, we have other issues and other layers to its layer, right? So, again, trying to figure out the way to bridge that gap. And that will come from us working together as a blockchain community, as a crypto community, to really kind of work on that. But I think that can, again, be a challenge, and, that's a barrier in itself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I go to a handful of elite conferences, for lack of a better term, and it's interesting to have these different discussions where my family is kind of like the gamut, and so it's like bringing these elite discussions down to earth. Do you think that, how do you get people who are having these high level, highly technical, I used to live in Silicon Valley, so these very Silicon Valley discussions, is it how do you get them to translate that conversation? Because it seems like it can't just be myself or you or other people who can bridge that gap for folks who don't quite get it, but it seems like there needs to be some type of engagement for the people who are, millions deep into, or the equivalent of millions deep, into cryptocurrency. How do we get them engaged in that conversation?
I guess that's a hard, I think there are those that are open to being able to work towards.
So I didn't mean that in like a polarizing way.
No, but in a way, it's, again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying. There are those that kind of care about doing that, and then then you have those who are just kind of. It's all about motivations. You talk about in health too. People are motivated by different things, but I think it can start from those who are doing blockchain and social impact work, and again. You can start small. It doesn't have to necessarily come from the top. Individuals at those types of levels or at those high levels, having those elite conversations are great for when it comes to, say, when we're talking about changing policy. Because even with blockchain and some of these emerging technology that's coming out, beyond healthcare, policies and regulations are going to have to change in order to kind of adapt to fit the new technology. If we're talking about, I'll use healthcare systems just depending on what state you're in, and every state has its own way of managing healthcare and healthcare records, and, each state has its own issues when it comes to, what's top priority or, funding. So it's these conversations need to be happening at all kinds of different levels, but it can really start with those within the blockchain community. There are many people who are already trying to do that, different universities. So trying to also infiltrate those kind of non-traditional spaces, or even some of the spaces where it's not necessarily on people's radar. It can be just trying to reach out and, figuring out how to just kind of bridge those gaps. But it can be, I think it'll be a challenge, especially when you start getting into the higher levels. And making it accessible for others. I feel like a lot of these conferences are great, but a lot of times they're expensive. They're hard to get to, and so having venues where people can access this information. It doesn't have to be grand. It can be something small, whether we talk about going to community, going to a local school.
Like a city hall.
Yeah, like going to, just finding those ways to just kind of integrate and start having the conversation, and again, making sure that it's simplifying it, and not making it where people are like, well, this is just going to be too hard and this is something we can't do at all. Like again, making it relatable. And I think what's also going to really start helping the conversation move along and kind of help bridge those gaps or start those conversations is the more that we start to see use cases. And I think that is key to helping us move forward, is really starting to see true blockchain use cases, and not only just seeing them being implemented, but also having, it's my research grade again, but having that, this is being evidence-based, right? So that we can say, well, this is truly the impact that this technology can have and has had. And I think once you have something tangible like that, that can make people more aware of it and more willing to engage and have those types of conversations. Is really seeing, here are the numbers. This is how much it's going to actually cost, or this is how much it's going to reduce, waste, or how much we're spending on certain things. And so once we really start to have that, that is also going to help bridge that gap and start really opening the conversation and making people really wanting to kind of take hold and engage with it.
Yeah, I'm wondering, just thinking out loud, if we're going to have like a leapfrog moment kind of like in certain parts of Africa or certain parts of India, where they're going to go to 5G and just totally skip over a certain thing. Have you seen any type of examples of that, or where they're just going straight to blockchain?
I mean, I think anywhere outside of the US. Because we're would say that, like
Fair enough.
in terms of us, like here, we're kind of behind in other countries. I think a lot of, or that places where you kind of have this blank slate almost, right? Where you can kind of really build your policies, your regulations. When we're talking about here in the US, we have all these laws and policies that again need to be reshaped or changed or adapted in order to fit this emerging tech or how we do business or how we conduct business using it. And for example, there's a Code Summit about 2 weeks ago, and there's Remedy Chain, I believe it is, I forget what they're based out of, but they wanted to be able to provide, using blockchain platform to provide cheaper prescriptions that were going to basically be wasted anyway. And they were able to start providing this medication to individuals, but then they also went above and beyond and worked to get the policies changed so that they can do this on a wider scale. And so that's the kind of efforts and work that needs to be done.
Lobbyists and other things to make it happen.
Yeah, so it's just advocating for this type of work. So it's going to take a lot of just some groundwork as well to get a lot of this underway.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a talk to begin the afternoon sessions, just 5 or 10 minutes. And one of the patterns I saw with blockchain and with crowdsourcing is that it can bring representation. And in our conversation now, I'm like, wait, but then so was the internet, 30 years ago. So were other instances as far as it being a leveling of the playing field. Do you have some type of vision, or do you feel as though there's a certain timeline when it actually will be able to represent, the guy on the corner in South Philly, as well as, the guy that's in the country club in Connecticut? Like, do you feel as though there's going to be a certain timeline where it's like, okay, blockchain is enabling that kind of equality? Do you feel as though that's going to almost naturally happen? Or do you feel as though there needs to be some type of concerted effort, or will end up being other technology that continues to potentially consider the disenfranchisement or people not feeling like they're being represented?
I think that's the last part is, again, that's all, again, when I ever talk about blockchain or something, I can panel or have any discussion with friends, colleagues, or,
I'm sure you get a lot of questions.
Yeah, I mean, that's always, again, my concern is, and worry is that if we don't get out in front of this, that potentially will happen. I think there is potential for that we continue to have those disparities and, continue to have, the gap getting even wider. There's still a potential for that. I'm optimistic that, it will, and again, I feel that there are enough people within the space who are actively working to make sure that that doesn't happen, and to kind of get out in front of that, that potentially may not be as bad, or, again, not be as much of an issue, but it's kind of hard to say, but, only time will tell. But I definitely feel that this technology will continue to move, and, people will continue to develop and create some really great platforms and products and technology. So, only time will tell. Again, it's one of those things that I'm really interested in, and kind of starting to get out in front of that as well, and start kind of figuring that out, and, researching that and seeing, what will be the impact of this in the next 3 years even.
Even 12 months.
Exactly, the next year, yeah.
Yeah, do we have any questions, additional thoughts, or kind of just, please?
Hey, so we went back a few years, not all that long ago. We were talking about this regulation, the change regulation, and forklift regulation. Going back a few years, there was this don't ask permission, make for forgiveness mentality that you saw. So if you remember the old Uber, They just went and did, and then if they got kicked out of Boston, they got kicked out of Boston. That was just the way they did things. Do you have any thoughts on that sort of approach, especially from entrepreneurship approach?
I think, again, I think it's depending on your product and what you're doing. I think a company or startup, something like a Uber, they're definitely, depending on what you're developing, what the use of the technology will be, right? If your platform, your product, your app. I think you will have those who will just go out and do, right? And they're just gonna try and then see if it works, if it doesn't, and then you kind of walk from there. I don't see anything, I think that can work out in a lot of cases, right? Because again, it provides like, look, this thing works. It's, profitable, it's helping people, it's, changing, making things more efficient, it's speeding things up. So again, when you have that can be beneficial, right? So I don't necessarily think you have to necessarily wait around and go changing policies and regulations, but when it comes to especially things like in healthcare, there are going to be certain aspects that will have to eventually change along with that tech as well. So it may not necessarily happen at the same time, but it may come into, it's just like we see with ICOs, right? So everyone went out and did ICOs, that happened, and now we're starting to have those conversations about the policies and SEC and regulations and things like that. So that will naturally kind of be a part of the process.
Yeah, if I can add to it, I think it's an interesting time, just over the past week or two, you guys are familiar with the news where you have Facebook, you have Google, you have all these new guys, and they're getting this backlash for, break stuff fast mentality. Someone else was talking about it earlier today. And it's interesting where I'm wondering, even with your background being healthcare, it's a little bit different than picking someone up for a ride. So I guess it's what you're kind of getting at too, where it's, I think it also depends on like the industry. You can do that if you're ride sharing. You might be able to do that if you're having people come into your home and sleep there. But, it seems like there's certain areas where, yeah, I wouldn't want someone to break stuff fast with my health.
Right. Or even, and there are, even with that, in comes issues of trust and data and privacy, right?
Right.
So even, we're talking about, let's talk about the 23andMe or these Ancestry.com.
Yeah, just HIPAA,
right? There are some standard kind of policies or regulations in place, and it's like, we like these applications, but we also don't want our data out there, right? Even if I can control it, it's still, someone's got access to it, even if it's decentralized, it's still some layer, it's on something, right? And so, these are the things that will kind of come into play when you start thinking about, certain industries or, even in grants management and, there's, talking about, what Sean Manning works on, talking about improving research and would it be improve access to data across different universities or across sciences to kind of improve the flow at which we're able to, do science essentially. And again, you've got all these different players. Somebody wants to do it, the other person's like, no way. Or you've got a backlog of other issues and challenges. And so those are the things that are going to slow certain things down in certain areas.
Makes sense. Do we have any other questions? Great. Well, thank you guys for having us. Dr. Tiffany Gray, Damon Brown. Thanks.